May 25th, 2020. The sky above Jaipur turned black, but it was not a storm. It was not smoke. It was something far worse. Millions of locusts descended on the pink city, devouring everything in their path. And this was only the beginning. To understand what happened that day, we need to go back to where it all started. Early 2020. While the world was fighting one invisible enemy, another was quietly gathering strength across the deserts of East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Desert locusts, the most destructive migratory pest on Earth, were breeding at an unprecedented rate. Unusually heavy rains from two cyclones, Makunu in 2018 and Luban, had transformed barren deserts into lush breeding grounds. What started as scattered swarms in Yemen and Somalia exploded into something biblical. A single square kilometer swarm can contain up to 80 million locusts, and they were multiplying by the day. April 2020. The swarms began their deadly migration toward South Asia. Pakistan was the first to fall. Crops vanished overnight. Farmers watched helplessly as decades of work disappeared in minutes. Then the swarms crossed the border into India. Rajasthan, India's largest state and home to the Thar Desert, became the entry point. The locusts moved like an invading army, and their target was clear: Jaipur, the state capital, home to 3 million people. May 21st, 2020. Reports started coming in from rural areas surrounding Jaipur. Farmers in districts like Saikar and Nagaur watched the sky darken as swarms passed overhead. They came like a cloud, a living, breathing cloud that ate everything. The Locust Warning Organization issued alerts. But after weeks of COVID-19 lockdowns, people were exhausted, skeptical, uncertain. Another warning? Another crisis? Many did not believe it until they saw it with their own eyes. May 24th, 2020. The swarms were now just 50 kilometers from Jaipur. Agricultural fields in Dudu and Chaksu were being stripped bare. Crops that had survived the pandemic's economic devastation were now food for millions of insects. Emergency meetings were held. The government deployed teams with tractors mounted with pesticide sprayers. Drones were sent up to track the swarms. But the locusts moved too fast, covered too much ground. That night, residents of Jaipur received SMS alerts on their phones. Locust swarm approaching city. Keep windows and doors closed. Do not go outside. For a city already confined by lockdown, it felt surreal, like a scene from a disaster movie. But this was real, and it was coming. May 25th, 2020 at 10 in the morning, the sky began to change. First, a faint hum in the distance, then a shadow creeping across the horizon. People stepped onto their balconies, looked up, and froze. The swarm had arrived. I thought it was going to rain. The sky looked strange, darker on one side. Then I heard the noise, a buzzing sound like 1,000 machines running at once. 10:30 in the morning. The locusts descended on Jaipur's outskirts. Residential colonies in areas like Jagatpura, Malviya Nagar, and Vaishali Nagar were hit first. Trees were covered within seconds. The insects clung to walls, windows, balconies. Everything turned brown and yellow. People screamed. They banged on pots and pans, hoping the noise would drive them away. It did not. The locusts kept coming, wave after wave, millions upon millions. Cars were forced to stop. Visibility dropped to near zero. Drivers turned on their headlights in the middle of the day just to see a few feet ahead. I was driving my daughter to the hospital for an emergency. Suddenly, I could not see the road. They were everywhere. On the windshield, the mirrors, the roof. I had to pull over and wait. 11 in the morning. The swarm moved deeper into the city. Parks, gardens, and green spaces were swarmed. The famous Ram Niwas Garden, home to the Albert Hall Museum, was covered. The lush trees that once provided shade were now skeletal, their leaves stripped in minutes. Vegetable vendors watched in horror as their fresh produce was devoured. Street food stalls shut down. Shopkeepers pulled down shutters. The entire city came to a standstill. Social media exploded with videos. Drone footage showed the swarm as a massive, shifting blanket over the pink city. International news picked it up. But for those on the ground, it was not a spectacle. It was a nightmare. 12 p.m. Emergency response teams were deployed across the city. Tractors with pesticide sprayers rolled through neighborhoods. Fire trucks joined in, using water cannons mixed with biopesticides. Helicopters circled overhead, spraying chemicals over dense swarm areas. But the locusts were relentless. For every 1,000 killed, 10,000 more arrived. The spraying barely made a dent. Farmers on the city's outskirts were hit hardest. Fields of wheat, mustard, and vegetables were reduced to barren land. One farmer in the Sanganer area stood in his field, tears streaming down his face. A farmer in Sanganer said he had already lost income due to the lockdown. He had borrowed money to plant this season. Now it was all gone. He asked, "What will I feed my children?" 2 p.m. The swarm began to thin. The locusts, having fed and rested, lifted off in search of new territory. They moved northeast toward Uttar Pradesh, leaving Jaipur in shock. The city looked like a war zone. Streets were littered with dead and dying locusts. Trees stood bare. Gardens were destroyed. The smell of pesticides hung heavy in the air. Cleanup crews worked through the afternoon and night, sweeping, spraying, disposing. But the damage was done. Aftermath. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization called it the worst locust crisis in decades. Over 400,000 hectares of crops were destroyed across Rajasthan. Jaipur alone suffered losses worth crores of rupees. But it was not just about money. It was about food security, livelihoods, and a city already struggling under the weight of a pandemic, now facing another disaster. The government launched large-scale operations. Drones, pesticides, and even experimental sound-based deterrents were deployed. By July 2020, the swarms had been pushed back, but not before causing devastation across 10 Indian states. The larger picture. The 2020 locust invasion was a wake-up call. Climate change, unseasonal rains, and delayed responses had created the perfect storm. What happened in Jaipur was not an isolated event. It was a warning. Swarms can return. They breed every 3 months. Without proper monitoring, early intervention, and international cooperation, the next invasion could be even worse. The day the locusts came, Jaipur learned a harsh truth. Nature does not wait for us to be ready. It does not care about our plans, our lockdowns, or our lives. And when it strikes, we are left standing under a blackened sky, watching everything we built disappear into the swarm.